So, this is an excerpt from the book White Wolf, written by David Gemmell. In this scene, Skilganon and Druss the legend meet, though neither of these two individuals know each other. Skilganon, however, suspects that the man before him carrying a huge battle axe is actually Druss the legend. Druss attacked a squad of horsemen who had set upon a group of refugees and was ably assisted by Skilganon. One of the biggest reasons I think that I like Druss was because of the code that he lived by, which was, in his words, "Never violate a woman, nor harm a child. Do not lie, cheat, or steal. These things are for lesser men. Protect the weak against the evil strong, and never allow thoughts of gain to lead you into the pursuit of evil." Skilganon has led the refugee survivors onwards and doubled back, as you will hear in the Story Zone. He wandered away through the trees, heading back the way they had come. After a while, he left the refugees behind, though if he glanced back, he could still see the twinkling light of their campfires. The crescent moon was bright in a cloudless sky as he climbed the last hill before the valley. In the bright moonlight, he could see the stripped carcasses of the dead horses. There was no sign of any pursuit. He sat down at the edge of the trees and stared out towards the east. "I don't think they'll come tonight, laddie," said a deep voice. "You move very silently for a big man," said Skilganon as the axeman emerged from the shadows of the trees. The man chuckled. "Used to make my wife jump. She swore I always crept up on her." He sat down beside Skilganon, laying his great double-bladed axe on the ground. Removing his helm, he ran his fingers through his thick black and silver hair. Skilganon glanced down at the helm. It had seen much use. The folded iron section showed many dents and scratches, and the silver motifs, 2 skulls alongside a silver axe blade, were worn down. A small edge of one of the silver skulls had been hacked away. "If the enemy had come, did you plan to take them all on by yourself?" asked Skilganon. "No, laddie. I'd guess you'd be along." "Aren't you a little old to be tackling cavalrymen?" The axeman glanced at Skilganon and grinned, but he did not reply, and they sat for a while in companionable silence. "Your accent is not Tentarian," said Skilganon at last. "No." "Are you a mercenary?" "I have been. Not now. You?" "Just a traveller. How long do you plan to wait?" The axeman thought about the question. "Another hour or 2. I thought you said you didn't think they'd come." "I've been wrong before." "They'll either send no one or a minimum of 30 men. "Why 30? asked the axeman. "The survivor is unlikely to admit his party was defeated by one old man with a big axe. No offence intended." "None taken." "He'll say they were a group of soldiers." "If that is true, why would they choose to send no one? Which was the first of your predictions?" "They are driving refugees towards Malikan. That is their main purpose, to swell the numbers in the city and create food shortages. They don't need to hunt down enemy soldiers here." "Makes sense," admitted the axeman. "You sound like an officer. I see you have a Nashanite tattoo. I bet there's a panther or some such on your chest." Skilganon smiled. You know our customs well? We old folk are a observant bunch." The young warrior laughed aloud. "I think you lied when you said no offence was taken." "I never lie, Daddy. Not even in jest. I am old. Damn little point in getting upset when someone mentions it. Turned 50 in a couple of months. Now I get aches in the knees and aches in the back. Sleeping on hard ground leaves me stiff." "Then what are you doing sitting here, waiting for 30 cavalrymen?" "What are you doing here?" countered the axeman. "Maybe I came to find you." "Maybe so. I think, though, that you came because you don't like seeing women and children hunted by cowards on horses. I think you came here to show them the error of their ways." Skilganon chuckled. "You would have liked my father," he said. "There were no shades of grey with him either. Everything was black and white. You remind me of him." "Is he still alive?" "No, he led a suicidal charge against the Pantheon regiment. It allowed some of his men to escape. My father didn't try to escape. He rode straight at the Pantheon king and his bodyguard. His was the only body the enemy did not mutilate." "They strapped him to his horse, left a gold coin in his hand," said the axeman softly. Skilganon was surprised. "How did you know?" "I've lived most of my life among warriors, laddie. The talk around campfires is mostly about everyday matters, a good horse or dog. Sometimes it's about the farms we'll all have one day when the fighting is done. When a hero dies, though, word comes to those campfires. Your father was Decado Firefist. I've met men who served with him. Never heard a bad word said about him. I never met him, though we both served in Gorbin's army. He was cavalry, and I've never liked horses over much." "Were you with the Immortals?" "Aye, for a while. Good bunch of lads. No giving them. Proud men." "Were you at Skleen?" "I was there." Another silence deepened. Skilganon saw the axeman's eyes narrow. Then he sighed. "Past days are best laid to rest. My wife died while I was at Skeen, and my closest friend. It was the end of an era." He picked up his helm, wiped his hand round the rim and donned it. "Think I'll find a place to sleep," he said. "I'm beginning to sound maudlin. Damn, I hate that." Both men rose. The axeman put out his hand. "My thanks to you, youngster, for coming to an old man's aid." Skilganon shook his hand. "My pleasure, axeman." Then the warrior swept up his axe and walked away. Skilganon stayed where he was. The meeting with the axeman, with its easy camaraderie, had warmed him. It had been a long time since he had relaxed so much in the company of another human being. He wished the man had stayed longer. He sat quietly on the slope, hearing his father's nickname of Firefist had opened long locked doors in the halls of his memory. The days immediately after news of Decado's death reached them had been strange. Skilganon at 14 had at first refused to believe it, convincing himself it was a mistake and that his father would ride home at any moment. Messages of condolence arrived from the court, and soldiers visited him, talking of his father's greatness. At the last, he had to accept the truth. It tore a gaping hole in his heart, and he felt he would die of it. He had never been so alone. Decado left a will, instructing Sperian and Molaire to share custody of the boy until his coming of age at 16. He had also left 2,000 rak, a colossal sum, lodged with a veteran merchant he trusted, but had invested it for him. Sperian, who had always been poor, suddenly found himself with access to capital beyond his dreams. Lesser men would have been tempted to appropriate some of it. Decaro, however, had always been a fine judge of character. Sperian proved himself worthy of that trust from the start. Untutored in economics and unable to write, he engaged Grievous to help him manage the funds and also tried to take an interest in Skilganon's schooling. This was difficult for him since he understood little of what the boy had to study. Skilganon did not make it easy at first. His heart was full of bitterness, and he would often rail at Sperian or Grievous, ignoring their instructions. His studies began to suffer, and he was, at the end of the term, demoted to the second class. Instead of accepting that this was a result of his own folly, he shouted at Grievous that he was being victimized because one of his guardians was a freak. Grievous had packed his bags and left the same night. Skilganon had stormed around the house, his anger uncontrollable. Sperian found him sitting in the garden. The servant was furious. "You should be ashamed of yourself," he said. Skilganon had sworn at him. In that moment, Sperian did something no adult had ever done. Stepping in, he backhanded Skilganon in the face. The boy was half stunned. The gardener, though slim, was a powerful man. "And I am ashamed of you," he said. Then he walked away. Standing in the garden, his face burning, Skilganon felt a terrible rage swell in his heart. His first thought was to find a dagger and stab Sperian to death with it. But then, as swiftly as it had come, his rage died. He sat down beside the small ornamental pond Sperian had built. The man was right. Molaire found him there an hour later, still lost in his thoughts. "I bought you some fruit bread," she said, sitting down beside him. "Thank you. Do you know where Grievous went?" "I expect he's at the Park Gates Tavern. They have rooms." "He'll hate me now." "What you said was hateful, Oleg. It hurt him dreadfully." "I didn't mean it." "I know. Best you learn from this. Never in anger. Say what you don't mean." Words can be sharper than knives, and the wounds sometimes never heal. An hour later, with the moon high, Skilganon entered the Park Gates Tavern. Grievous was sitting at a corner table alone. Even to the 14-year-old, he seemed strangely out of place. Most of the men here were labourers or craftsmen, burly and bearded, toughened by years of labour. And his blue silk, flared sleeve shirt, grey roots showing in his dyed yellow hair, the slim former actor stood out like a beacon. Skilganon approached him. He saw the sorrow in Grievous's eyes and felt the burden of his guilt drag down like a rock on his heart. "I am so sorry, Grievous," he said, tears in his own eyes. "Perhaps I am a freak. Don't worry about it." Grievous turned away and stared out of the window. "You are not a freak. You are my friend and I love you. Forgive me and come home, please. Forgive me, Grievous." The actor relaxed. "Of course I forgive you, you stupid boy," he said, rising from his chair. It was then that Skilganon realized that a silence had fallen over the small crowd in the tavern. He looked round to see a lean, sharp-faced man staring at him. His eyes were glittering with malice.